I thought I'd have you look over my shoulder while I mold the green sand mold into which I'm going to put the resin-bound molds. And these are patterns. They're PETG prints. I've waxed them, and that's the only prep that they've had since they came off the printer. We're going to riddle on some sand. And then I'm going to put just a little pressure down to sort of lock those molds in place. I found that if I don't push down on the riddled sand just a little bit, there's just too much free movement. And in some cases, when I put in the sand like the rest of the sand like this, they get shifted around. And I saw the Flask move a little bit there as I put that sand on it, but I don't think that matters at all in this case. We'll go around the corners here a little bit. A little bit more sand. I've had people caution me when I watch videos about packing the sand too tight, but if anything, I've had more trouble when I haven't packed the sand tight enough. So I pack it pretty vigorously. We'll screed off the excess. And put on a bottom board and flip this. Here we are. And you can see the 3 patterns there. Now we're going to put on the cope, and that cope has pins that register with the drag. Here's the pins right here, and here are the holes that those pins register in. Very good. Yes, these are homemade, or shop-made, I guess you'd say, steel flasks. They work out pretty well for me. I have used wooden flasks, of course, in the past, but over time, unfortunately, they burn up, especially when using iron. That's not so much of a problem with aluminum or even bronze, but with iron, temperatures are so high that very typically they burn, the flasks will burn up. And then this will form a down sprue for us and a place where I can put a filter if I want to put a filter in. And we'll follow a similar routine there of putting in some sand and packing it in. But first, I'm going to put a little dry sand down, which I have found to be the best parting material between cope and drag that I've used. I've used a lot of different talcs and whatnot. Those work fairly well, but this really works well. I might brush off. Well, I won't bother because, again, we're going to have the actual resin-bound molds in place. Otherwise, I might have brushed off this extra sand here, but it's a fine point. And in this case, we'll just dribble on some sand vertically so as not to move the down sprue. And again, sort of tuck it in like so. That'll hold it in place. And then get some good green sand in there. Yeah, let's dump the rest, or a good portion of the bucket anyways. One of these 5-gallon buckets holds about 50 pounds of mold sand. And if you fill it up with just plain dry sand that hasn't been mulled or whatever, just right out of the bag, it's about 65 pounds. But mulling whips a lot of air into the sand, which is a good thing because it provides some porosity, allows for escape of gases when the hot metal enters the mold. This is an aluminum tool that I made a while back. I used to use wood, but I like the aluminum better because it has a little more heft. It's very durable. I have an idea that will be enough ramming of the sand. Screw this off. Good. And we'll put the excess back in the bucket and use it for the next mold that'll be coming up. Very good. Let's see if we can find that down sprue here. Should be in this location right in here somewhere. Maybe I'm missing it. Back this way. Ah, there it is. Okay, well, I'll repair some of that damage, so to speak, right here. Back right back in. This green sand heals pretty well when I do things like this. Sticks together. I've been using this green sand for quite some time. Just cut a little pouring basin here. I like to cut the pouring basin with a little tumble home because that helps the metal not slop out as you pour into the basin. When I first started molding, I thought it seemed to make sense to make sort of funnel-shaped pouring basins, but I found out that the metal would come down one side and just shoot right back out the other. So I have tended now to make more square pouring basins and undercut the edges just a little bit to help reduce that. That's a little larger pouring basin than I might ordinarily make, but it'll be fine. And then I also like to shave down the top of the mold here a little bit at an angle, because once again, if there's any little bit of iron that sort of pops out on top of the mold, if the mold is perfectly flat, the iron can run any which way, but if you've got a little downslope, it tends to run right back into the pouring basin, which is nice. I'll trim up a little bit around the down sprue so as not to leave sharp edges that could easily break off and contaminate the metal. And as you can see, nice clean split between the cope and the drag, which I really like. And then let's draw out these patterns. These are brand new patterns, so they don't have any established holes in them, which you normally would have. Give it a little wiggle. Comes out nice and clean. That's nice. They're drafted about 3 degrees. And I printed them with 0.1 millimeter layer heights. That makes for a pretty smooth surface, even on the vertical sides there. That one broke out a tiny bit right there. That won't matter. So here's where that square recess will be for the filter. You can see it kind of outlined here. So we got to make a way for the metal to get from here into there. And the easy way to do that is just carve in channels, which I will do right now. We'll make nice, generous channels there. Molten iron flows pretty freely, so you don't need huge channels, especially for those little tiny molds that we're going to use. I like to brush the edges just a little bit in case there's some tiny crack that you don't see. This would dislodge any sand that might end up, once again, getting into the mold, contaminating it. When I pour this mold, we're going to tilt it up a little bit this way, not as much as I'm showing, but a few degrees. And what that does is prevent random entry of the iron into these various 3 chambers, but rather it will form a level equal in all 3 and fill in an organized fashion. Makes a lot better fill. Otherwise, you can get cold shots if, for instance, this side decided to take most of the metal, and then this side maybe a little bit here, and then finally this one filled. It's not a good method to use. It's much better to incline molds almost always, and certainly in flat-ish patterns. If it were a deep cylindrical or square, whatever mold, that wouldn't matter so much. But things that are more or less horizontal, it's better to incline that mold just a little bit. And then we're going to make a few holes to let the hot gases out of the mold. I hope you can see this. Looks like the camera is pointed in such a way that you will be able to see what I'm doing. My apologies if not. And then let's draw that pattern here. Good. Set this aside, put the draw spike back up there, and we'll blow this off. And we'll put a filter in there. This is what the filter looks like. It's, I think, silicon carbide in kind of a spongy pattern. I just slip it into that recess. And it feels like that one would probably stay all right, but sometimes I've found that they'll want to fall out. So if I press down the sand, just a little bit there and there, that locks it into place. So now that mold is ready to receive the resin-bound molds. They're presently setting up. I just molded them a few minutes ago, and so they'll take a little while to cure, and then we'll drop those in. But for now, we'll stop the video and be back a little bit later. Now it's time to put the resin-bound sand molds into the green sand mold. And you can see I have made 3 of them in the interval. And I marked them so that I would keep the pieces that match together. All we need to really do is provide an access for the iron on one end here. So to do that, I'm just going to scrape away some of this sand. It doesn't take a very big channel, as iron flows pretty freely. I think I mentioned that before. We'll just scrape that out like so. And maybe a little more, although I'll bet you that would be fine. Smooth up the edges a little so that we don't leave random bits of sand that are likely to get into the mold. And then that goes right down there like so. There is a little space there that the iron can run into, and there's a little clearance around the mold as well. So get this in here like that. Get it all nice and lined up on top of each other there. And then we'll pack some green sand in to stabilize everything and take up space. So I've got a little bit of that behind you here. Can't see that, but I do have it. And I think maybe I'll do that after I have actually all 3 in place. Let's just hold off on that for a minute. And this one's marked with 2 slots. I don't think it matters too much which end we go with here. I'm going to go this way. Scrape that on out. I do hope you're seeing this. I'm doing this by myself, so I can only guess that you're in the screen, but it looks like you are, according to how I look back. And let's make sure we get the sides together that go together. Yep, like that. And again, you can see that those molds really do fit nicely together, as you'd expect. And we'll get this over here. Back there like that. And again, I can see when they're nicely matched up. I'm going to tuck this one over a little bit, the lower one, just to line it up. See if I can. I think I will. Yeah, there we go. You can't see that, unfortunately, but to take my word that they're lined up on top of each other well. And then here's the third one. That one actually broke out a little bit as I forced the pattern out when I separated them, and that's fine. We'll just convert that to the in gate. There we go. And here we do match. Get the right end there. That wouldn't work so well if I put the end the wrong way. Get them tucked in. I'm tucking them in tight on the one side, so I really have to put green sand only on this side. And just kind of push that down in there. I don't want to go clear up to the end here with the green sand for fear that I'll accidentally get green sand in the mold, the resin mold. And that, of course, we don't want. So I'm just tamping this in with that end of the tool. I'm going to use my finger here as a dam to limit movement of that sand up toward the head, that gate end there. I'm just tucking her in. And that's pretty firm. I think that'll hold it nicely. And I'm leaving a gap here on purpose, really, at this end. There's no need to close that up, and if I try to close it up with green sand, I'm virtually certain to accidentally get some inside of that mold. So we'll just do the same thing here. I'll ask you to forgive my shoulder interfering with several of the shots here in the next part of this video. I simply could not see that my shoulder was getting in the way as I'm doing this recording on my own. Thanks for your patience. About got that one, I think. Once that green sand's in there, that mold is really stabilized. You can see that I'm trying to move it around, but it will not move. And let's do the same thing here on this end, on this last mold. And I probably will fill in this little gap where some of that sand came out when I was taking out the pattern before. Wouldn't really necessarily have to, but it just seems like the right thing to do. I want to be careful when I do that not to put in too much, because that could prevent closure of the mold. If I put in too much sand there, that little defect, and then we'll have iron running out of the mold onto the ground, and that's no good. Yeah, once again, tamped in there pretty well. And then pretty confident that I didn't get anything down on this end that I didn't want. I'll fill this in just a little bit here. And then screed that off. And since this pattern is handy, I'll just use it as a screed. There we go. I think we're ready to close that mold. We've got the vents made. We've got the filter in place. These molds are nicely secured. We've got a channel for the iron to get in. And let's match up the pins with the holes and put that thing together. There we go. Once I have it in, I can tell because when I rock the upper, that is the cope, rock the cope side to side, the drag follows right along. So I know that those pins are nicely locked in place. And then it's my habit to just push down good and hard after the cope and drag are mated, just to be sure, again, that we get a nice seal and we don't have iron running out on the ground later. So now all that remains is to go ahead and put the straps on the end here, which I won't show on camera. There's no point in that. And then later on, we'll get this poured. I did get the straps on, and once those straps are in place, this whole unit is nicely locked together. So I don't have to worry about float. This is such a small mold, I wouldn't anyway, but a lot of times you'll see people putting weights and things on top of the cope here to hold it down and prevent it from floating. But with this particular system, I don't have to do that. And then these special shop-made nuts with lugs on the end are designed so that I can use those for lifting gear if I want to. On such a small mold as this, I don't really need to use lifting gear, but on some of my bigger ones, these same nuts fit, and it can be used to lift that up like so.